The hallway floors always gleamed when Ethan finished his night shift. It was 3:37 a.m., and the skyscraper's lobby stood silent, bathed in the soft golden light from the marble chandelier. Every night, Ethan pushed the mop bucket through the halls of Caldwell International, a billion-dollar corporation that made headlines daily. But to Ethan, it was just a place with too many floors, too many suits, and too little warmth. Ethan wore the same navy blue jumpsuit every day, a faded name tag clipped loosely on his chest. Most employees didn't look him in the eye. Some never even noticed him. He was the janitor, a shadow in the corners, but Ethan didn't mind. At least, that's what he told himself. What they didn't know was this: Ethan knew more about the company than they thought. Every night, as he swept under the desks and dusted the windows, he read the memos left behind. He studied the printouts, carelessly discarded in the recycle bins. He listened quietly during after-hours meetings when senior staff forgot he was in the room. Over time, he'd learned how the company ran, what made it rise and what made it fall, but Ethan had no dreams of being more than a janitor. Dreams were for people who had choices. Ethan had none. He'd grown up in the system, abandoned at a hospital as a baby, raised by different foster families who never kept him long. He'd learned early that people walked away. So when he turned 18, he walked away too. Alone, by 25, Ethan had learned to live invisible. He found peace in silence and purpose in work. But everything changed on the night of Mr. Caldwell's death. It was sudden. Heart attack. The media went wild. Mr. Roger Caldwell, billionaire, founder of Caldwell International, and one of the richest men in New York, was gone. People mourned. Stocks dropped. The board panicked. And as expected, talk of his successor filled the air. Everyone assumed it would be his son, Richard Caldwell. Richard was the face of luxury: polished suits, designer shoes, and a smile that never reached his eyes. But what the public didn't know was that Mr. Caldwell never publicly confirmed Richard as heir. In fact, no one outside the family knew what was written in the old man's will. 2 nights after the funeral, Ethan found a strange letter near the CEO's office. It was sealed in an envelope marked "Private Deliver Only to Ethan Brooks." He almost dropped it. His name, in the CEO's handwriting. He looked around. No one was in sight. The security cameras had been turned off for maintenance. His fingers trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. You have questions, and they will be answered. But first, go to the address written below. Bring no one. Trust no one. Everything is about to change." Ethan stood frozen. His name, a secret letter, and a dead billionaire's final message. It made no sense. He read it 3 times just to be sure. The address led to a private law office in Manhattan. He couldn't sleep that morning. Instead of heading to his small apartment in Queens, he changed out of his jumpsuit and took the subway to Midtown. The law office was tucked between 2 tall buildings on a quiet street. It looked like the kind of place powerful men used to hide things, secrets, money, maybe both. Inside, an older man greeted him. "You must be Ethan," the man said without looking up. "Yes. I got this letter, I know. Sit down." The man's name was Mr. Goldstein. He was Mr. Caldwell's personal lawyer for over 30 years. He opened a locked drawer and placed a thick file on the desk. "Do you know who you really are, Ethan?" Ethan frowned. I'm a janitor, Mr. Goldstein gave a small smile, almost pitying. "Not exactly." He slid a birth certificate across the table. Ethan looked down. His name was there, but the parents listed were shocking: Roger Caldwell and Margaret Caldwell. Ethan's chest tightened. "This must be a mistake." "No," Mr. Goldstein said quietly. "You are the first son of Roger Caldwell, born in secret, hidden for your protection. Your mother died giving birth, and due to threats from inside the company, your father sent you away with plans to bring you back when it was safe. But things got complicated. Time passed, and he never forgave himself." Ethan shook his head. No, I grew up in foster homes. No one ever came for me. Not once, Mr. Goldstein nodded. I know. And for that, he begged for forgiveness every day. He handed Ethan another paper. It was the last will and testament of Roger Caldwell to my firstborn son, Ethan Brooks. I leave full control of Caldwell International. My legacy is his. He is the true heir. Ethan's mouth went dry. His hands began to sweat. He wanted to laugh, or run, or both. He stood. This is crazy. I'm not a businessman. I clean toilets. Not anymore, Mr. Goldstein said. Ethan walked out of the office feeling like the city had flipped upside down. The traffic still roared. People still rushed by, but nothing felt the same. He had questions. Thousands. But one kept rising above the others. Why now? And what was he supposed to do with $1 billion empire? Ethan didn't go home that night. He sat on a wooden bench in Central Park, the will clutched tightly in his jacket pocket. The cold breeze tugged at his sleeves, and the distant hum of the city played like background music to the chaos inside. His mind, he stared at nothing. People passed, dogs barked, cars honked, but he didn't see or hear any of it. How could he be the son of Roger Caldwell, the man whose photo was on every finance magazine, the man who built an empire? How? Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. It has to be a mistake, he whispered to himself, but the birth certificate wasn't fake. The lawyer wasn't lying, and the documents were real, thick, official, signed and sealed. It was true. All of it. He was Ethan Caldwell, but he didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a janitor who had no business stepping into a boardroom. When morning came, Ethan forced himself back into his old routine. He returned to Caldwell International, put on his uniform, and pushed the mop like nothing had changed. It was easier than trying to explain the impossible, but someone was already watching him. Richard Caldwell, from the top floor. Richard had been alerted the moment Ethan walked into the law office the day before. He had spies in the legal team, people loyal to him. Richard didn't know what was said inside, but he knew enough to be nervous. His father's will had never been shared with him. That alone was suspicious. Who was this janitor? Why did Roger's lawyer call him in? And why did Richard's father keep so many secrets? Richard paced his office, his fingers tapping the glass desk. His father always kept a tight grip on the company and on information. For years, Richard played the part of heir, but deep down, he always felt like his father was hiding something. And now, that something had a name, Ethan. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to act normal, but it was hard. He moved slower. His thoughts spun in circles. He almost knocked over a potted plant while cleaning a window. People stared at him more than usual. It was like the building could feel something was different. He made it through half his shift before receiving a message from the front desk. Mr. Richard Caldwell would like to see you in his office. Ethan blinked. Why? The receptionist only shrugged. He said it's urgent. Ethan cleaned his hands, wiped his uniform, and rode the elevator to the 40th floor, the top of the tower. The elevator ride felt like a lifetime. When the doors opened, Richard was waiting. He was tall, perfectly dressed, and had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Ethan, right? He asked. Ethan nodded. Yes, sir. Richard motioned to a chair. Sit. I want to talk. Ethan sat stiffly, unsure what was happening. I heard you visited my father's lawyer yesterday. Richard began casually. Ethan didn't answer at first. Richard leaned forward. Why would a janitor meet with a billionaire's private attorney? I got a letter, Ethan said slowly. From your father. I didn't understand it at first. I just followed the instructions. Richard tilted his head. And what did he say? That you're special? That you're somehow family? Ethan stayed silent. He wasn't ready to reveal anything. Richard smiled coldly. You know what I think? I think my father was losing his mind toward the end. He got paranoid, wrote strange things, trusted the wrong people. Ethan looked him in the eye. So you don't believe him? I believe in facts, Richard said smoothly, not fairy tales. The room grew quiet. Then Richard stood and walked to the window. You see, Ethan, this company doesn't run on charity. It runs on experience, education, vision. You mop floors. I run empires. Let's not confuse the two. Ethan stood. I didn't come here for power. I didn't even ask for any of this. Richard turned sharply. Then stay in your lane. Go back to your mop. Forget the lawyer. Forget the letter. And you'll keep your job. Ethan stared at him, a mix of confusion and anger boiling in his chest. I don't want your money, he said, but you want the truth, don't you? Richard replied, his tone sharp. Sometimes the truth costs more than you're willing to pay. That night, Ethan didn't go back to the janitor's closet. He walked straight to Mr. Goldstein's office. I want to know everything, he said. Start from the beginning. The lawyer nodded and pulled out a locked box. Inside were letters, photos, DNA results, and a journal written by Roger Caldwell himself. Ethan read for hours. He learned that Roger had fallen in love with a woman named Margaret, someone the public never knew about. They lived in secret, had a child, and planned to marry. But Margaret died during childbirth. At the same time, Roger received death threats from people inside the company who didn't want a new heir to be born. He made a desperate decision. To hide Ethan, a trusted nurse helped him place Ethan in the hospital system under a false name. The plan was to reclaim him later, but life got messy. Years passed. The threats never stopped. Roger grew older and ashamed, but he never stopped watching Ethan from a distance. Ethan's heart broke reading the journal entries. He wasn't unwanted. He was hidden to protect him. The man he thought abandoned him had been living with guilt and pain all his life. Ethan wiped his eyes. I need time, he told Mr. Goldstein. The lawyer nodded. The will gives you full control, but you have to claim it within 30 days, or it defaults to Richard. Ethan nodded. Then I have 30 days to decide who I want to be. Outside, the city lights glowed brighter than ever. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, his reflection in the glass window of a luxury car. He still looked like a janitor, but inside him, something had changed. The question was, would the world accept him as the billionaire he truly was, or would they fight to keep him in the shadows? Ethan stared at his reflection again, this time in the bathroom mirror of a hotel he could never afford until now. He hadn't returned to his small apartment since learning the truth. Instead, he checked into a quiet place near Central Park, far from anyone who knew him, far from the mop and bucket, far from Richard's glare. But no matter where he went, the truth followed him. He was a Caldwell. Not by luck, not by accident, but by blood. Still, knowing the truth and being accepted were two different things. The next day, Ethan stood before the gates of Caldwell International again, but this time, not in uniform. He wore a simple gray suit, nothing flashy, borrowed from Mr. Goldstein's assistant. He felt strange in it. The material was stiff. The shoes hurt his feet, but he had to make a statement. Today, he wouldn't be the janitor. Security at the front door didn't recognize him. Can I help you? One of them asked. I have a meeting, Ethan replied calmly. Check with Mr. Goldstein. The guard gave him a doubtful look, but made the call. 10 minutes later, Ethan was sitting in the boardroom on the 40th floor, surrounded by 12 men and women in sharp suits, members of the Caldwell board. Richard entered last, with the air of someone who believed the room belonged to him. Well, this is dramatic, Richard said, pulling out a chair. The janitor turned CEO? That's a Netflix pitch, not real life. Ethan said nothing. He looked around the table, reading the faces of the board members. Some looked curious, others looked annoyed. One or two looked hopeful. Mr. Goldstein stood beside Ethan. Ladies and gentlemen, I call this emergency meeting on behalf of the late Mr. Roger Caldwell, whose last will and testament have now been made public. He placed a stack of copies on the table. In it, Roger names Ethan Brooks, his biological son, as the rightful heir and successor to the company. Richard laughed coldly. This is madness. You expect us to hand over a billion-dollar company to someone who used to clean the floors? One of the board members, Miss Lillian Greaves, leaned forward. That depends. Is it true? Mr. Goldstein nodded. The birth certificate, DNA tests, and personal records all confirm it. Ethan is Roger's first son, then why hide him for 28 years? Another man asked. Because Roger received threats, Goldstein said. He made the choice to protect his son by placing him in the system. He regretted it every day of his life, but he never stopped watching. In fact, Ethan has been in this building for the last 2 years. You mean as a janitor? Richard snapped. Yes, Goldstein said, which gave him an honest view of this company from the ground up. He knows your systems, your employees, even the flaws you overlook. Ethan finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. I never asked for this, but I'm not going to let anyone erase who I am. I read my father's words. I know what he wanted. I don't care about the money, but I care about what he built. And I care about the people here, the ones no one sees. The room grew quiet. Richard stood up. This is a joke. I've worked for years to become the face of this company. I've built relationships, signed deals, made profits. What has he done? Mopped hallways. Ethan looked him in the eye. And yet, you're the one trying so hard to keep the truth hidden. Miss Greaves cleared her throat. There's only one way to solve this. Everyone turned toward her. She pulled out the company bylaws. In the case of disputed succession, the board may approve a 30-day trial period to determine leadership capabilities. At the end of those 30 days, the board votes. If Ethan fails, Richard becomes permanent CEO. If he proves himself, the seat is his. Ethan swallowed hard. 30 days to prove he could lead a billion-dollar company. 30 days to change how the world saw him. 30 days to fight for what was rightfully his. I accept, he said quietly. Richard smirked. Good. Let's see how far a mop can take you. That night, Ethan returned to his hotel with his mind racing. He'd never run a business before, much less one of the most powerful companies in New York. He had no MBA, no fancy degrees, no powerful friends in the industry, but he had something Richard didn't. He knew how it felt to be invisible, and he knew how it felt to be underestimated. He spent the next morning reading everything he could about Caldwell International. Financial reports, employee complaints, marketing plans, legal issues. He spent time in every department learning, asking questions, listening. He even returned to the janitor's closet, where he found a dusty notebook he used to write in on breaks. It had ideas in it, notes about things that didn't work in the building, places where costs could be cut, departments that were wasting resources. He brought it with him to the next board meeting. This is my first proposal, he said. These are real problems and real solutions. From someone who actually saw them. The board was surprised. Richard looked annoyed, but Miss Greaves nodded. Let's test it. By the end of week 1, Ethan had reduced building operation costs by 8. By the end of week 2, he uncovered a quiet fraud case happening in the HR department. A friend of Richard's had been forging expense reports. By the end of week 3, employee morale had doubled. Ethan was seen eating lunch with the mailman, helping interns, and greeting the security team by name. He's doing something different, one board member whispered. He's leading like Roger did. Before the money changed things, but Richard wasn't done. On the final week, Richard leaked a photo to the media, an old shot of Ethan in a worn-out jumpsuit, cleaning a toilet. The headline read, "This man may run Caldwell International. Are we in trouble?" It went viral. By morning, the company's stock dipped. Investors called. Reporters camped outside the building. Ethan was humiliated. He stayed inside, staring at the screen. All his efforts, all his hard work, reduced to one photo. Mr. Goldstein visited him that afternoon. You can still walk away, he said. You have nothing to prove. But Ethan shook his head. Yes, I do. He stood and faced the mirror. I'm not ashamed of where I came from. That photo? That was me. But the man I am now, that's my choice. And I choose to fight. He walked into the final board meeting with his head high. Before anyone could speak, Ethan played a video. It showed employees from every level of the company, janitors, security, accountants, interns, speaking about how the company had changed. In just 30 days, one woman said, "I've been here 12 years. This is the first time someone listened to me." A security guard said, "He knows our names. Do you know how rare that is?" Another added, "He reminds us that we matter." When the video ended, Ethan spoke, "I may not have a degree, but I have experience. Real, human experience. I've worked from the bottom. I've seen how this company really runs, and I believe I can make it better, not just richer, but fairer, smarter, stronger." Miss Greaves looked around the room. Time to vote. One by one, the board members cast their votes. Richard got 3, Ethan got 9. It was done. Ethan Caldwell was the new CEO. As Richard stormed out, Ethan remained seated, quiet, calm. The room clapped politely, but Ethan only smiled slightly. He didn't need applause. He had something more powerful, purpose. Ethan Caldwell walked into the CEO's office for the first time, not as a janitor, not as a guest, but as the new head of Caldwell International. The room smelled of aged leather and expensive cologne. The desk was huge, made from a rare wood, imported from Italy. The view stretched over the skyline of New York City, where steel and glass kissed the sky. But none of that impressed Ethan. What struck him most was a single photograph on the shelf behind the desk, a picture of Roger Caldwell, standing with a newborn wrapped in blue. The baby's face was blurred by the years, but Ethan knew it was him. For a moment, his chest tightened. All the years of wondering who he was, why he'd been left behind, and if he mattered at all, landed there, in that quiet room, where power once lived and now rested on his shoulders. Mr. Goldstein entered with a soft knock. "They're ready for your first executive announcement," Ethan nodded. "Let's go." In the large auditorium downstairs, the entire staff of Caldwell International had gathered. Thousands of employees. Some whispered when he walked in. Others looked unsure. Cameras flashed as he stepped onto the stage. He cleared his throat and faced them. "My name is Ethan Caldwell," he began. "Some of you know me as the guy who emptied your trash cans and cleaned your offices. That was me. And it still is. Because I believe leadership isn't about a title. It's about service." The crowd grew silent. "I didn't grow up with money or connections. I grew up moving from one foster home to another, wondering where I belonged. But now I know. I belong here not because of my name, but because I understand what this company is at its roots. And I'm here to protect it, grow it, and make it a place where every voice matters." There was no thunderous applause, just a deep, respectful silence, but from the back of the room, someone clapped. Then another, then dozens more joined. Soon, the auditorium filled with applause, not for a billionaire, but for a man they believed in. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Caldwell International, but in the shadows, something stirred. Later that night, as Ethan reviewed files in his new office, a call came in from an unknown number. He hesitated, then picked it up. A deep, raspy voice spoke. "You should have stayed in the closet, janitor." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone. He wasn't surprised. The company was massive, and its success had made enemies both within and beyond. His father had mentioned the threats in his journal. Ethan assumed they died with time. He was wrong. The next morning, Ethan had the company's internal security do a quiet audit, checking for backdoor files, illegal activity, and money trails Richard might have left behind. Within hours, red flags started flashing. There were hidden payments sent offshore, masked under fake charities. There were security reports deleted from the archives. Someone had been covering their tracks for years, and all of it pointed to Richard. Ethan met privately with Miss Greaves, who had become an unexpected ally. "Do you think he's behind the call?" Ethan asked. She nodded slowly. "Richard's ambition runs deeper than you think. He's never accepted being second, not to anyone, especially not to you. I need to take him down, but legally, cleanly, then you need evidence. And someone who knows where the bodies are buried. That's when Ethan thought of someone he had almost forgotten: Mark, the old IT manager who retired a year ago. Quiet, loyal, and one of the only people Richard actually feared. Ethan tracked him down in upstate New York, living in a quiet cabin with his wife. At first, Mark was hesitant to talk. "I'm done with Caldwell," he said. "Too many secrets, too many lies." Ethan handed him the photo of Roger and the baby. "I'm his son, and I'm trying to fix what's broken." Mark stared at the photo for a long moment. Then he sighed. "There's a folder. I saved it before I left. It has everything. Emails, bank records, even private audio files. Why didn't you come forward before?" "Because I was scared. But I'm more scared of what happens if someone like Richard gets this company." That night, Mark gave Ethan a flash drive. "Use it wisely, and be careful." Ethan returned to the city and handed the drive over to the legal department and Miss Greaves. What they found was worse than expected. Richard had not only stolen money, he had leaked insider information, manipulated stock prices, and even orchestrated false reports that led to the firing of innocent employees. The evidence was overwhelming. Within days, Richard was arrested. The story made every major news outlet. Caldwell International's former acting CEO faces fraud and corruption charges, but even as Richard was led away in handcuffs, he smirked at Ethan. "This company will break you," he said. "Just like it did to Dad." Ethan didn't respond. He just watched him leave. That night, Ethan sat alone in his office. The city sparkled outside, the lights reflecting on the windows like stars on water. He had won the title. He had uncovered the truth. He had cleared his father's name and taken his rightful place. But inside, he felt the weight. Running a billion-dollar empire wasn't about money. It was about pressure, decisions, and sacrifices. It was about staying true when everything around you wanted you to change. As he leaned back in the chair once occupied by his father, he whispered, "I hope I'm doing this right." And somewhere deep inside, he felt the answer not in words, but in peace. He was no longer the janitor with a mop. He was Ethan Caldwell, and he was just getting started. 3 months had passed since Ethan Caldwell officially became CEO. Caldwell International was changing, and everyone could feel it. The mood in the building had shifted. Smiles were more frequent. Emails were kinder. People at every level, from janitors to junior analysts, felt like they belonged. The culture Ethan had quietly dreamed of during his mop and bucket days was now becoming real. But Ethan knew something most of them didn't. Change came with a price. Late one evening, after most employees had gone home, Ethan sat in his office going through handwritten letters. Not emails, not reports. These were real letters from employees, left anonymously in a box he'd placed at the reception desk titled, "Tell me what you'd fix." One letter read, "Dear Mr. Caldwell, I've been in this company for 12 years and no one ever noticed my ideas. Thank you for making space for small voices." Another said, "My son was sick last year and I was scared to tell but when you revised our health plan, I cried. Thank you for seeing us." Ethan smiled, but he also felt a tear slip down his cheek, not for sadness, but for the strange, deep ache of someone who had longed for meaning and finally found it. The next morning, Ethan had a meeting with the city's mayor. The city wanted Caldwell International to lead a new tech initiative in underprivileged neighborhoods, bringing free digital literacy programs and training centers to local communities. It was something Ethan had once wished for when he was a kid in the system. Now, he had the power to make it happen. When the mayor asked why he was so interested, Ethan simply said, "Because I know what it's like to grow up invisible. No one should have to stay that way." The mayor nodded and shook his hand. "You're not like the others," he said. Ethan smiled. "That's because I never had the chance to forget where I came from." Despite his success, some doubted him still. Magazines ran stories with titles like "The Janitor CEO," "Lucky or Legendary," "Ethan Caldwell a Fluke or the Future?" One business rival even said on national television, "Give him a year. He'll crash the company. He doesn't have the training." But Ethan didn't argue. He let his work speak. Under his leadership, Caldwell International launched 3 new sustainable energy projects, grew its philanthropic branch by 60%, and opened 5 innovation hubs across the U.S. And perhaps most impressively, employee turnover dropped by nearly half. People didn't want to leave anymore, not because of the pay, but because they felt seen. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan visited the cemetery where his father was buried. He carried a small folder. Inside it were the latest photos from the company's progress, a new wing at the city hospital funded by Caldwell, a technology lab opened in honor of Margaret Caldwell, his mother, and a letter from the mayor recognizing Ethan for his contributions to the city. He knelt at his father's grave. "I hated you for a long time," he whispered, "for leaving me, for never coming back." The wind rustled gently through the trees. "But now I understand. You weren't perfect. You were scared. And you made the only choice you thought would protect me." He placed the folder on the grave. "Your legacy isn't in your buildings or your billions. It's in people. That's what I've learned. That's what I'll carry forward." He stood, brushed the leaves off his coat, and took one last look at the grave. "Rest now, Dad. I've got this." A year after becoming CEO, Caldwell International held a special anniversary event. The hall was filled with employees, their families, city leaders, and partners from around the world. Ethan stood on stage, no longer nervous or unsure. He had grown into the role not because of his bloodline, but because of his heart. "Some of you know me from my old days with a mop in my hand," he said, smiling. Laughter rose gently from the crowd. "Back then, I thought the most important thing was to blend in, to not be noticed, but I was wrong. What matters is not blending in, it's showing up, with kindness, with honesty, with purpose." He paused. "This company was built by my father, but the future? That belongs to all of us. Every cleaner, every coder, every leader. We build it together." The room erupted in applause. After the event, Ethan walked through the office alone. He stopped by the janitor's closet, the one where he used to sit during breaks, writing ideas in a notebook. It was still there, still quiet. He smiled and stepped inside. On the shelf was the old mop he used to carry. He picked it up, held it for a moment, then leaned it gently against the wall. No shame, no regret, only gratitude, because the janitor wasn't who he used to be. The janitor was how it all began.